doing on Memorial Day?
Perfect. So a few weeks ago, I got an email from a pastor that I regularly do AV work at. And the email I read is this. It said, hey, well, do you mind being able to run audiovisual for a Memorial Day service that we have coming up this October 1st at 5 to 7? Now, this wouldn't be a irregular email if it weren't for the fact that Memorial Day is in May. So I thought maybe the church being accustomed to Zoom services, this wouldn't be like something that they were doing in person. I didn't realize how dumb this assumption was because I read the email as this when it actually said this. So I showed up. There's flowers everywhere. There is a picture of a woman up front and an urn in front of that picture. And I walk up to the pastor and he goes, I'd be ready for this one to be amusing because she passed away really unexpectedly, dropped dead from a heart attack. Oh no, I'm sitting there thinking, what have I done? I am completely unmentally prepared, underdressed like astronomically, and I have patriotic theme music picked out for a memorial service. So I'm scrambling in the tech booth, trying to switch my music and trying to sunk back so nobody can see me in the front. All things considered, the service went fairly well. Very sad because as the service went on, I started to think. And you may be thinking to yourself, did Abel just introduce his experience at a very sad funeral with the most funny misunderstanding of his entire life? You'd be absolutely correct. But as the funeral went on, I started to get a little somber because a lot of the family members were talking about the fact that it was weird how this is the way she ended up at church. And I thought about it. And I thought, is there something I could be doing more with my time? She passed away really unexpectedly, and that's something that could happen to any one of us at any time. What am I doing with my time? And I thought about this book that I've been reading, Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. And it talks about the ways that Christians spend time in ways that are not glorifying God, not uplifting, and not beneficial to anybody. And I started to think a lot about this book and the things that it meant for us. So I started to break down our time as students. This is kind of my general sense of what students do on a daily basis. You can spend 6 to 8 hours of sleep, 3 to 5 of those in class, 3 to 5 doing classwork, and if you have a job, you can work anywhere from 4 to 8 hours as a student, really. And if you're on the left side of this, you're probably an insomniac, but you probably have a lot of free time on your hands. And if you're on the very right of that spectrum, that's 26 hours, you can't do that. So we're somewhere in the middle there. And I like to think that when you pan it out across life, you spend up to a quarter or a third of your life sleeping, 1/3 of it at work, 9% of it in school, 5% of it eating food, who would think, and 3% of it commuting. Now that leaves us with 83% of our life taken up by things that we need to do to survive. All these tasks and obligations that keep us occupied. And we often get so involved in the fact that we have all these tasks to do that we forget who we are in the eyes of God. So a few months ago, 5 months ago in June, I had a very radical change in my life that caused me to rethink a lot of different things. I was involved in a very serious car accident. Missed a light because I was trying to change lanes and missed the lane to do a very old truck. And the impact that this had on my life, nearly losing my life, that's a point of view shot from where I was. I just remember thinking, I'm alive, sitting in the car, waiting for the ambulance, getting in the ambulance and then being at the hospital. I'm alive. And that's just a scary reality of life. Not everybody knows when something like this can happen. In fact, nobody knows that something like this can happen. There are people that lose their life every day in unexpected ways. So how do we work to not waste our life? And I'd like to think of it in terms of this culture that John Piper talks about in his book, about Christians getting so caught up in the fact that we work, we do good things to edify ourselves, and then at some point in our life, we die. And there's a certain celebration at the end of a believer's life that when they finish, the work is done for them. But I think our time would be spent doing more beneficial things. I think in our culture, I look at the way that it's so self-fulfilling in terms of the amount of time we spend on social media, the amount of time that we spend indulging in ourselves, doing things that are for us, that we forget who we are in God. The use of social media, pornography, things that are not edifying to really anybody other than ourselves, are at an all-time high. And that's a scary thought. It should be a scary thought to anybody who is a believer in Jesus Christ. So how do we combat something like that? I say we look at the Bible. We look at verses that in the Old Testament and the New Testament that show us what life we ought to live and how we ought to spend our time. I look at 1 John about the desires of this world passing away. And I think that's a very strong message about what we do is very temporary on this earth. But we can move our time to make eternal impacts. We look at Psalms that teaches us to count our days, to make them meaningful, make the most impact out of each one. John 9:4, as long as the day is, we must do the works of him who sent us. Night is coming and when no one can work. And that's not a literal sense of we do things during the day and we do things during the night. This day is the time of our life on earth, and then we pass away, where we can't do anything. Ephesians 5:15 through 16. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise but wise, making the most out of every opportunity, because the days are evil. That statement has not been more prevalent than it is today. So what do we do? I want you guys to take a few seconds, close your eyes with me, and think about what you do in your free time. Think about specific moments, times that you've had available to yourself. What do you do? Just think of a few different opportunities where you've had time to yourself. All right, open your eyes. Now, if you think, yeah, I binge watched Netflix, I spend a lot of time scrolling through social media, I think you'd be among the vast majority of Americans. So, are you using your spare moments to live out God's purpose for you? Are you willing to take time during your day, even if it is busy, to show moments of care to those around you, whether they're strangers or whether you know them? And if you were to stand before God right now, would you be content in the way that you've acted on the convictions of the Holy Spirit? So, a lot of us are, I had a lot of conviction writing the speech because I hadn't spent my life for a long time living the way that I thought God should be calling me to. I felt ashamed of the way I was living. And I thought of some practical ways to improve. So I'd say spend less time on technology, please. It's so prevalent to like have a phone out under you and just be scrolling like while somebody's talking to you. And I think that can be disrespectful at times, if not most of the time. So I have an app on my phone that limits certain use on apps like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's restricted. I can only spend a certain amount of time on each one to forcefully intention myself in making better actions in my daily life. I would ask you to find somebody to hold you accountable and do intentional things that make sure you're living out the calling of Christ. Have them ask you what you've done in your week that will force you to be honest and vulnerable with them. And intentionally create situations in which you'll be forced to step out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of you guys can find this in things like your PCM, things like everyday ministry that you can do. Find somebody on the street, pray for them, make yourself uncomfortable, meet people that you haven't met, and put yourself out there. What do you have to lose but time? Maybe it's our pride holding us back sometimes, but I think we value our free time so much that we care too much about what's going on in our lives rather than the people around us and their eternal purpose. So To finish it off, I'd like to read a quote from John Piper's book. I will tell you what a tragedy is. I will show you how to waste your life. Consider a story from the February 1998 edition of Reader's Digest, which tells about a couple who took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago, when he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells. At first, when I read it, I thought it might be a joke, a spoof on the American dream, but it wasn't. Tragically, this was the dream. Come to the end of your life, your one and only precious God-given life, and let the last great work of your life before you give an account to your Creator be this, playing softball and collecting shells. Picture them before Christ at the great day of judgment. Look, Lord, see my shells. That is a tragedy. So I want to challenge you guys today. What are your shells? What are you holding on to in life that is not edifying to the people around you, and more importantly, edifying to God? Can I have you guys rise as I pray over you just a moment? Father God, I pray over each person in this room, and I pray that every single moment of each of their lives would be lived with intentionality and would be lived with purpose, because every hour, every moment that we take should be in your glory. God, I pray for the actions that some people in this room might take today. I pray that your Holy Spirit would push them to be uncomfortable, to stand before others with no reverence to themselves, but rather pouring themselves out to be a vessel and sacrifice for you. God, let this moment be one of sanctification among everybody in this room, that they might reprioritize their life and spend their time. In your holy name. Always like do something worthwhile with it. For the glory of God.